Welcome. We're going to be learning all about the professional certificate in coding. This is a full stack development with MERN course. And we're here today with two of our program faculty to tell us all about what you'll be learning throughout your time in this program. We're also going to be learning today how you'll be learning. So not only what is the curriculum, what you will be learning, but how is that delivered in such a way to ensure that you have the very best learning experience possible. So we're going to be touching on both of these key themes as we make our way through this next hour together. Our two keynote faculty presenters and the designer of this program, the designers of this program are here with us today. Firstly, we have Professor John Williams. He's a professor of information engineering in MIT Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. Professor Williams, I'd like to invite you to come in and say hello to our audience.
You caught me by surprise there, Marie. It's good to see all the selection of skills online there. I'll have a couple of comments about that later, but it's good to see you all, and we'll hopefully answer all your questions.
Thank you for being here with us, Professor Williams. You got a snapshot there of Dr. Sanchez. He's here with us too. Dr. Sanchez, would you like to pop in and say hello as well?
Hello, everyone. Look forward to talking about the course.
Thank you so much for being here. Both to our professors, they're here to describe more about the program. But before we hand over the spotlight, we want to get back onto this topic of who is this program designed for. This program is going to prepare you with the skills that you need to start or continue your career in web and application development. And this is a full gamut course as a web developer, front end, full stack, and software developer. We cover all of these areas in the program. If you're just launching your career, or you're building upon tech skills, or you're switching into this career for the first time from a lateral field such as marketing, sales, operations, this program was really designed with you in mind. We wanted to welcome you to MIT xPRO and give you a better understanding of this larger ecosystem that you're joining when you join this program. Not only are you going to be learning about coding, but you're going to be doing so shoulder to shoulder with MIT xPRO's community, which is really centered on leveraging world-renowned expert content to make learning accessible anywhere. So really breaking down those barriers of access to the incredible wealth of knowledge housed within MIT, within MIT faculty, in order to make cutting-edge research available to each and every one of you, and really doing this around what we know works well for adult learners. So this program has been designed to be delivered around what we know works well in the neuroscience of learning. So you'll see the various delivery components, the way that we capitalize on your peer learning, the way that we've designed exercise and activities in the program, really helping you to take these concepts and bring them into a place of action, into a place of real world application. So this isn't a highly theoretical or conceptual course, but rather one meant to really help bring these concepts to life in your organization and in your professional roles. So with that, I'm going to hand over the spotlight now here more fully to Professor Williams and Sanchez. But just to touch on a few key points here, Professor Williams has co-authored over 250 journals and conference papers. He was named alongside Bill Gates and Larry Ellison as one of the 50 most powerful people in computer networks. He's collaborated internationally along with Dr. Sanchez and was one of the inventors of the Internet of Things. So certainly you are learning from the source here and learning from Professor Williams. And with Dr. Sanchez as well, he holds a PhD from MIT as well as co-directing the MIT's Geospatial Data Center with Professor Williams, one of the architects of the Internet of Things, and certainly a renowned researcher and scholar. He's done a lot of online teaching. I think that the bio details here are a bit outdated. It says you've been a part of over 150 educational videos, but I think at this point we're near the thousands in terms of how many videos you've been involved with, Dr. Sanchez, but certainly that pedagogical approach to taking this expertise and delivering that worldwide. So thank you both for being here. I'm going to hand over the spotlight to you both now.
Thank you, Marie.
Thanks, Marie. So Abel, I think this is your favorite phrase. Where did it come from?
This is quite an interesting op-ed, opinion editorial that appeared in the Wall Street Journal back around 2011 or so. You can look it up after. And it made an argument that software was eating the world, that everything was becoming software. And within 3 years or so of this article appearing, the top companies in the market were all technology companies. And if you look around today, and I think this happens, it continues to increase. If you look at things like agriculture, which most people think of as, touching the ground, planting the seeds, to things like libraries, to things like education, like we're doing now, it's really all about software, right? And it's central to our world and increasing in importance. And so there's a lot more I could say. I'm certainly, one of the things you should know is we're both very passionate about this, and we love touching the bits and living this digital life. John?
Yeah, and just, neither of us took computer science as a degree. Basically, we taught ourselves. Now, we've been obviously learning for quite a while. Basically, the skill set that you need for software is you need to practice it. It's the more you practice it, the better you get. And the kind of people that succeed are the ones that don't give up, that we call it grit, that it just takes some grit. But the great thing about computers, if you like, is that you can make mistakes and it's okay. That most software doesn't work first time. It doesn't work second time. It's usually the 99th time or the 100th time that you get it to work. And so in some ways, they call this a friendly learning environment, because you can make mistake after mistake and the compiler will give you a clue as to what you've done wrong and you can correct it. So Abel, I think that's one of the phrases that, again, you came up with, or that you found, was that this is a friendly environment. It's not changing radically. The rules stay pretty much the same over time. Is that your sense?
No, absolutely. And I wanted to come back here momentarily for the music. And I think it's a great parallel, because if you think about music, it's the sort of thing that you can't really skip all week and do 5 hours on the weekend. It doesn't work. You got to touch it, and you got to touch it every day, and you got to let that sort of sit and build. You got to digest it, right? And you're constantly hearing new things, and you're trying to break them down into the steps, and you're trying to learn new techniques. So it's very, very much like music. And the reason I think it's interesting is because that's probably about as far as you could come from a machine, right? You're using your hands, you're using your ears, you're not using a machine, right? I know about all the electronic music world, but let's leave that for a second, and let's think about the traditional, way to learn the piano. Like John and I like to say, you can't really read a book about the piano and say, okay, now I know how to play the piano. It doesn't work that way, right? You got to touch it, you got to live with it, you got to stay with it. And so that's quite different. And what John's mentioning about a learning environment, it's very true in the sense that you don't need other people. You can do it on your own. It gives you feedback. And as time goes on, much like music, you start to develop that intuition as to what works, what doesn't work. When you make a mistake, what does that mean, and what could be the source of it? And that's that gradual progression. I'd like to also compare it to writing, right? That you sort of build over years, that skill that happens. And so that immediate feedback, that rapid cycle you can go through, for example, let's say you're trying to sort an array, and this is the first time you've done it, a list of numbers. You have some intuitions as to how it might be done, and no one's stopping you from doing it completely wrong and exploring every possibility. And it's you and the machine and the code that you're writing. Very engaging, very objective, and it's signaled back to you, meaning, if you're wrong, it'll tell you you're wrong. It won't run, right? So, John, how do you see it?
Yeah, and it's not really about mathematics. That there's very little mathematics that you need at all. You should know how to add things up so you can check your answers are right or not. But it's not really about mathematics. It's more about just thinking logically about something, understanding the steps that you're trying to take to get to a solution. And we're going to go through that. And we designed this course so that, we're expecting you not to have any programming experience. A lot of people come to this, and we see here that there's over 50% with no programming experience. Now, obviously, it helps if you've done some programming, but we have got all the content there that you can learn from the very beginning. And a lot of the things that you'll be learning about are the tools that you will use to help you kind of manage the software, to debug the software. And ultimately, we're going to be talking about a complex software environment that isn't just on your machine, that we're going to be talking eventually about databases and about web servers, and take you through from the very beginning where you're running something on your own machine to where it's running on another machine that will be heavily using some of the tooling. And this tooling, my sense is, this is why the software industry is doing so well, that it's invented these new kinds of tools that give tremendous leverage. If you look at the numbers, a programmer today is handling 100 times more code than a programmer 10 years ago. And it's not like we've got any smarter, it's just that the tools to help us manage the code have got a lot better. So a lot of this will be about introducing you to new tools. So, the first tool is that you need an editor, you need your laptop, and we'll be getting you to know your machine so that you can find your way around your own machine, where the files are, etc. And we'll be building up on that. Is that your sense, Abel, that tools are so important in this area?
Oh, tremendously so. And it goes always all the way to knowing a tool becomes a job. For example, if you know the GitHub environment fully, thoroughly in and out, you can become a DevOps engineer or a configuration engineer at the very least. And so each of these become building blocks that you then use to be able to create new applications. And there's a number of these that we have identified throughout the course and that we will call out to you. And this is a very comprehensive course in that we take you from the front end, what you see, to the back end, that back end logic that runs somewhere, to storage of information. And so we're moving through the tiers, and we start you off with some of the fundamentals of the front end, but throughout, we're also covering many of these tools that, as we mentioned, become building blocks. For example, if you do not know how to clone a repository from GitHub, and even the language I know is it's difficult to get to. All they're really saying is, can you take a copy of this code that is in this folder and put it on your machine? Everybody can do that, right? But when they talk to you about doing it through the Git, the Git protocol and clone and add and commit and push and all these funny sounding words, it's a little bit harder to get to. And so we go through all of these, and we accompany you from the very get-go, where we're not even talking about code, just some of these ideas, all the way till building 3-tier applications, which means you're doing front end, back end, and storage, which really has a tremendous amount of complexity, which is why it's called full stack. John?
Yeah, and I think we should emphasize that there are careers in the front end, there's careers in the web server side, there's careers just in the back end. So this full stack kind of takes you through, and a lot of it, as Abel is saying, is about, we want you to understand the language, because when you go for an interview, they're going to be expecting you to know what things are called. And, ultimately, if you don't know the language, it's very difficult to look things up and to understand what we're telling you. So we're very cognizant of that. We'll explain things. And then our goal is, by the end of this course, you'll be able to, as Abel kind of made the analogy with swimming, you'll be able to swim for yourself. You'll be able then to learn for yourself. This is not a theoretical course. This is, as we say, it's a contact sport, programming, that you have to do it yourself. But once you've got this capability, I think it gives you a tremendous feeling of creativity that, like Abel was saying, you know, you're writing code and probably nobody's ever written code exactly like that before. That there's so many ways of achieving the same result that you've got this creative aspect to it. And hopefully, you know, I think Abel and I kind of fallen in love with programming, that we just love to do it, that it's not a pain. I mean, it's a pain if you've got a deadline like of, you know, 3 o'clock this afternoon, you have to have something done by, but in general, it's not. It's a tremendously creative enterprise, and it's more related, as we're saying, to things like music than it is to mathematics. That the mathematics side is actually very small. And most of those are in libraries, done for you in other. It's already been done. If you want to take the average of 1 million numbers, you know, you won't have to program that. It's in a library. You just say, take the average of all these numbers and it'll happen. So, you know, we're coming into a world where a lot of things have been built for us. Full stack is about putting all of these together for, you know, a modern computing environment, which companies have. So that today, almost everything is being sold through the web, that you're keeping track of customers, you're keeping track of your product, etc., that there's data being produced. And for companies, understanding and analyzing that data is really, really valuable. So a lot of the things we'll be covering are to do with, you know, everything a company is doing today. Maybe we should actually move off this slide to the next one, Abel, because I think there's some things there that we'd like to talk about. Abel, do you want to talk about the environment here?
Sure. So the other thing you should know as well is that we have selected the tools and we have selected the platforms that are most widely used. And these come from perhaps unexpected sources. For example, Node, one of the most widely used environments, servers and application servers that exist, actually started out as the JavaScript interpreted inside of the browser. Somebody made that observation back in 2008, and by 2010, they had created a server, and it has taken off like wildfire. By far, the most productive, the most number of packages, libraries, and when you hear the numbers, you might think we're making it up, but you can look it up. It's over 100 billion downloads per month, and every time we check it, we always laugh just because the numbers are crazy, right? Many packages in the tens of millions of downloads per day. And so this is simply an example of one of those components. We have Express, which is one of those components that builds off of Node, but does all the wrapping when it comes to communication with the server. It turns out that most of the major packages that run around the world, things like Apache, things like Internet Information Services from Microsoft, etc., do this because it's too much of a pain to be able to deal with this low level. And so Express is the one that does it in the JavaScript environment. And it is, again, one of these packages that if you go look for it, you'll see it being downloaded in the tens of millions per day. We need to store things. And so we chose one here that is called MongoDB. And the other thing that I should mention as well is that if you are new to this, and I know half of you are learning, or you will be learning in an environment that is the most, that gives you the biggest mileage for the language that you will learn. If you were to learn Python, you'd learn Python on the server. You would most likely need to write JavaScript for the front end, which would be the client, which would be another technology very different than Python. If you were going to go to database, you'd have to yet learn another language. In this case, all of the languages and packages of the stack are the same one, which is JavaScript. So you can use JavaScript on Node, you can use it in Express, you can use it on Mongo, and certainly you can use it in React. And so all of these different packages coming together refer to MERN. However, you would be able to use them independent of MERN, right? Meaning that you could use React on its own, or you could use Node on its own. But here's the overview of the technologies. But as we mentioned before, there's a lot more tools that we will be going through.
Hi, Marie. Can we go to the? Great, thanks. So these are some of the tools that we'll be using. I think altogether we've got about 20 odd, but these are the tools that allow you, a single person, basically to create something that 10 years ago would have taken probably a team of 100 people, something like that. That there's been this revolution where today code is being written and deployed, and it's being updated perhaps 10 or 20 times a day, that the best companies are writing and deploying live code. And the clock tick has got so fast that that's why companies are so valuable, actually, that they can do things and move very, very quickly. So the companies that we're talking about are the Facebooks, the Googles, the Amazons of this world, that, you know, the trillion-dollar companies. I should have mentioned Apple as well, of course. But this tooling is what allows a single person to actually reach out and construct these highly complex environments. So I don't know whether any of you have thought about how the browser works, but your browser, you know, maybe you're using Chrome or you're using Firefox or whatever, but when you type HTTP into that header there, you're basically sending a message out across the internet to a web server that's sitting somewhere, and you're addressing that particular web server and asking it to give you a web page. And the web servers have changed radically over the last 20 years, since, you know, the 2000 when they first really came about, or a little bit before that, actually. The first ones were in the mid 1990s, but the web servers are highly complex today, but can be broken down so that you'll understand the principles of them. And as Abel is saying, we're going to use Express, and you can spin up an Express web server in just a few lines of code, literally half a dozen lines of code. You can actually spin one up in one line of code, but you need a few lines of code. And so things today have got much more, that they're at a higher level of abstraction. And you need to understand, though, why are they like this? Why are they operating in this way? And the language that you use to communicate between the browser and the web server is a language called HTTP, and we'll be digging into how these HTTP messages are constructed. Abel, maybe you want to say something about the browser, because, you know, we talk about the browser as if it's a simple thing, and it's not at all. Maybe you want to talk about, because we'll be constructing, you know, web pages, and we need to understand that browser.
Sure. When it comes to the stack of technology, as I mentioned previously, you have the front end. You know, this is the thing you see. So when you type your address in your browser, the page that loads, this is the front end. Then you have the back end, you know, the back end logic, and then you have some storage mechanism, which is your database. But if you think about that front end, you can make a career, as John mentioned, just in the front end. And what does that mean? Well, there's actually 3 languages that run within that browser environment. The very first one is HTML, that you might have heard of. You can think about this as layout, you know, how things are arranged, where they go on the page. Then you have CSS, which is cascading style sheets. That is one of the most cryptic, however valuable technologies that there is, because in the end, user experience, as you might have heard of, has become incredibly valuable. This is what customers, this is what, you know, citizens interact with when it comes to, you know, what they see. And so being able to style it, make it look pretty, make it dynamic, make it, you know, how it transitions from one thing to another. It's all about CSS, and being able to master that requires quite a bit of investment. Then you have, of course, JavaScript that allows you to manipulate the HTML and the CSS and many other things as well. But all of this is just the browser. And this is why we say oftentimes that many of these are careers unto themselves. There's one person that has written most of the CSS books that exist out there. And so you can imagine that that person has quite a bit of requests for their expertise. But this is an area that certainly has come up in importance. And now user experience engineers are one of the most sought after. Now, there's many other areas that we could walk through as well as we move to the back end. John, I don't know if you want to talk about back end or the storage.
Well, so these environments are quite complex, but in fact have huge reach. And I think that's one of the things that today, why is a company like Apple worth $3 trillion? Well, it's partly because of its reach, that it can type in and it can send that message out to 1 million people, or hundreds of millions if it wants. That the kind of reach that you have with this tooling has never existed before. So today, the tools give you this reach that you can display things to millions of customers. If you have a following, you become one of the movers and shakers of the web, that you can earn a living just by having people follow your videos. So this is an environment which companies are wrestling to understand. I mean, some companies have mastered this, but a lot of companies haven't. And this is why they're looking for people with this skill set, because it's become critical to their survival. Maybe we should move on to the back end. That we've talked about the browser that communicates with the web server. Then sitting at the very back end, we usually have the database. And that in itself, databases have exploded into many different kinds of databases. There's SQL-driven databases, there's object-oriented databases, there's data lakes, there's data warehouses, and there's data on the move and static data. So all of these areas today are exploding into, whole opportunities for companies to exploit, and they're looking for people that understand what's going on in them. So I think we shouldn't go too deep into the tooling, but we mentioned GitHub. We should also mention Docker containers, because today most code on the server side is running in a Docker container. And these containers are like little machines, if you like, that we can run code inside them. And that code doesn't care what kind of machine it's running on. It could be a Windows machine, it could be a Mac, it could be a Linux machine. But so we can write code for Docker containers, or for containers in general, and that means that we can run on any operating system. So some of the problems that we've struggled with in the past have almost disappeared today. We don't have to worry about a lot of things. But obviously, you need to understand how containers work, and we're going to be covering that in some detail. Abel, are there any other highlights? You mentioned NPM, Node Package Manager, which, like you were saying, people download these packages or libraries. Package is just another word for a library of code that you can leverage. And as you were saying, it's amazing. There's 100 billion downloads in a month. That's phenomenal. So something's going on in this area. Maybe we should move to the next slide.
I just wanted to add
wanted
to add something about VS Code. VS Code, Visual Studio Code, is the most widely used editor. And for those of you who might be interested, and it's relevant because of the conversation of this course, it actually has foundations on JavaScript and the browser engines. And it is bypassed by far the main offering from Microsoft, which is just simply Visual Studio. And this is overtaken the industry and has become the de facto editor for Google, for Facebook, for the big tech companies across the whole, and it is what you will see. Now, the reason I mentioned its background just because I wanted to emphasize that it's part of that ecosystem of JavaScript, but I also wanted to mention it as one other tool that as you master it and become more comfortable and learn about many of the features, you will become more productive. So for example, something as simple as multiple cursors. I know many of you have not started yet in this environment, and you might think, why would I want multiple cursors? Well, it turns out to be incredibly important.
What's a cursor, Abel? What's a cursor?
Yeah. So the little place where your mouse is, right? So imagine that you have a list of, say, time codes, and next to the time codes, you have titles of talks. And this is something I was just doing, yesterday. And you want to be able to remove all the time codes and just leave the titles of the talks. Well, this is an environment or a scenario in which you might want to match all of the time codes, and you might want to remove just that part. If you do it one by one, you can. However, it would be much quicker to select them all and be able to remove them. This is just a simple, tiny example of the productivity that you might find within this environment. And you have tools that are being used again in the tens of millions. So for example, if you add, say, pretty syntax arrangement within your environment, a lot of times you'll copy over and paste code that's pretty hard to read, and it's a bit structured in a really weird way, or you might lose the returns. So if you highlight all of this and just say, pretty my code, it will actually render it all very nicely on the page. Again, just one of the many features that are part of this, that is part of this overall community of open source tools that are powering the new products that are being made in the market. And so I just wanted to emphasize that because I think it's a pretty tangible tool and ecosystem of plugins or extensions.
Yeah, actually, one of the things I wanted to just mention, Abel, following up on what you're talking about, is that we will often give you a lot of the code. That this is an area where it's more like you're training to be a doctor, and you follow a doctor around and see how they do their, grand rounds or whatever. That it helps to see somebody else's code first. So we'll be giving you a lot of code and asking you to alter it, maybe make it do something new, but you won't, at the beginning, you won't be coding from scratch. We will give you and show you how these things work. Over time, you'll be writing more code and you'll feel more comfortable. But initially, we'll be kind of showing you, this is a kind of, what do they call it? An apprenticeship almost, that we'll have done it for you. Believe me, we've suffered over some of these things. So when you find bugs, and spend some hour debugging it, that we'll have spent that time as well. That it's these are complex environments, but you'll get used to them. And so we have, as we've been talking about, the three main parts: the web development. So this is the HTML, the front end, the browser, how we lay things out. Then we have the web server and React, which is a framework. It's the most popular framework by a factor of 2 or 3. So that'll allow you to develop basically product levels code. And then the backend, the database that we'll be using Mongo, but it's pretty easy to substitute other databases that companies use. So you'll be getting comfortable in all of these areas. As we've said, there are careers that can be had in any of these 3 areas. And in fact, some of these areas break into more, that things like cybersecurity apply to all of these.
So maybe I can jump in here and we can just kind of talk through some of the program topics. We can showcase these here and then pass it back over to you both. What could be helpful is describing sort of the various layers of teaching support and other outside supports in this program, in addition to your faculty support here. So certainly we'll talk a little bit about course leaders, program advisors, teaching support in the program. So if you do encounter any of those technical issues, you have a 24/7 support team who can intervene and help get you set up an entire week to orient with the program before you kickstart your learning, where you'll get to know your cohort, you'll get to know your faculty, you'll get to know your teaching team, you'll get all of your systems up and running. You can work through any of those issues with program support in that first week as well. This is that overview of the portfolio projects. If you're interested in a sneak peek of the types of capstone sort of projects that you'll be working on in each of these modules here. Getting that GitHub portfolio ready to showcase as you think about career readiness. This is a big part of what we do, sort of building that throughout the program. So key takeaways here, you have the learning that you'll be taking away from the program. You also have a chance to earn a certificate here from MIT xPRO that showcases your learning and really formalizes your training here. You'll have insights and coding demos, that GitHub portfolio that you can showcase in job interviews. This is a portfolio of your work here. And then throughout your time in the program, there are weekly office hours. I'm just going to highlight that here at the bottom of the screen because this is a big part of your learning experience. In addition to your program faculty, you have course leaders. They host weekly office hours. You can bring your coding exercises. You can work through those together in real time with your course leaders. You can ask questions. And you're also getting that personalized feedback and support. So you're not just submitting answers or assignments for completion, but you're really submitting them to get that detailed support and that customized feedback. All really geared towards career preparation, helping you to land a job here in this industry. So your course leaders are going to be helping you to get your resume up to speed, any cover letters, help with job interview questions you might want to be prepared for. All of these various components of navigating your career are going to be included not only as exercises in the program, but also as part of that course leader experience from week to week. So certainly show up. There's a robust system of teaching and learning, a lot of different relationships that you'll be building throughout your time in the program. If you think of yourself at the center of learning, then a layer beyond you, you have your peer support. You're really learning with a global group of peers representing many different areas of expertise, many different industries. Beyond that, you have your course leaders at the helm of that day-to-day learning experience. And of course, your program faculty, Dr. Sanchez and Williams here at the helm of your curriculum. All of this housed within MIT xPRO and the mission to advance learning globally. So this is an example of that certificate of completion. This is a digital certificate that you can put on your LinkedIn profile or other social media. Again, really formalizing your training and helping you get a foot in the door in the job market. John, Abel, I know you're still with us here today. Any final thoughts, any final ideas or thoughts that you'd like to share with us as we close out today's session here?
No, it's pretty clear that online learning today is revolutionizing education. Abel and I spend most of our time ourselves watching other people's videos. It's a great way to learn. The nice thing is that you can replay things again and again. You don't catch them first time. We notice even in MIT in our live classes, the students prefer to have videos now that they can watch afterwards. So we think this is the future of education, that eventually all education is going to be more like this than it is having face-to-face classes. And so I think that this is one of the most comprehensive courses we've done, that's for sure. The amount of content in this is really quite significant because we're covering all of these areas, which each one of which has got multiple careers embedded in it. Abel, anything that you'd like to say?
Yeah, that the demand for this profession was already high prior to the pandemic, and now post-pandemic is going through the roof. Fortunately, this is an industry where you do not have to have, 10 years of education. Really what they're looking for is for you to be able to make a contribution. And the field is full of people who dropped out of college or career changers. Back some time ago, in fact, IBM was famous for hiring a lot of musicians because they thought they had the right making to be able to make a good software engineer. So it's an exciting profession. There's a lot of opportunity. And the last one that I'll mention is that you can really go into any industry. If you're interested in healthcare, there's opportunities there. If you're interested in technology, there's opportunities there as well. So I encourage you to finance for sure. So
a huge one.
I encourage you to follow this through. It's really a rewarding and exciting career. So.
And there's certainly never been a better time to launch into this career than now. You'll see the program is 32 weeks long here, and we estimate 15 to 20 hours per week. As you're looking ahead across these 32 weeks, you're really aiming for that 15 to 20 hour window. And the way that we've designed the course is with a blended asynchronous and synchronous approach, giving you that highly relational experience of coming into sessions such as this one here and learning live from your course leaders, from your peers, from your faculty, but also having a fair amount of asynchronous learning opportunities so that you can design a schedule that works for you. So as you're looking at that 15 to 20 hours, really being able to identify a schedule around your availability. So any further detail that you'd like regarding those logistical components, please do get connected with an advisor. Thank each and every one of you for your time. Thank you for being here. It's been an absolute honor and pleasure learning shoulder to shoulder with each and every one of you. John, Abel, any final words of wisdom that you'd like to leave us with as we close out here today?
I mean, I'd just say that one of the most useful pieces is the portfolio. That anyone interviewing you will ask you for your GitHub website, and you'll be able to point them to your GitHub website, and it'll already contain probably, I think it's about at least six major projects. That there's 2 per module, and so you'll end up with 6 major components that you'll have built and that you can show to a prospective employer. Today, when Abel and I look to employ somebody, that's one of the first things we ask them for is their GitHub website, that we can look at it, and in a few moments we can tell whether they understand the topics or not. Abel?
No, absolutely. I would follow on from John that the projects really are for you stretch. We give you quite a bit of freedom. We give you, between both John and me, a good spectrum of the type of projects. Take them as a base. You can push on them to anything you like. You'll do one that's, for example, called Bad Bank. We teach it also at MIT, and people use Bad Bank for all kinds of different types of applications. So think of these as a starting point, and push on them to satisfy your curiosity, and in the process you will learn a great deal.
Terrific. Thank you both so much for being here with us and staying all the way through the end of our questions here today. Again, an absolute honor learning from you both here. With that, we're going to sign out. Thank you again for joining.
That's great. Thank you, Marie.
Thanks, Marie.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, Abel.
Thank you all.